I came within 2 weeks of shutting this company down. And I did it. I lost money in Avadim for the first 5-6 years. And I got to the point where they were not on the verge of bankruptcy, but you couldn't cash flow them anymore. So I had taken so much money out of the one company that it was struggling to stay afloat. And I had gotten to the point where I knew I was going to close Avadim down. I just couldn't do it anymore. This was going to get shut down. There was no possible way to continue it.
All right, cold season is almost here, and that means big scary germs are on the way. It's on everybody's mind. You see, everybody's afraid of germs. It's interesting, though, because germs aren't always the bad guys. In fact, trying to sterilize ourselves with all these antibacterial products can actually be a bad thing. But we are on the right track. Researchers are discovering that the skin is indeed one of the proven gateways to better health. You know the saying, you are what you eat. Well, the same could be said about your skin. You are what you put on your epidermis. Yeah, it's a big word, but it's the largest organ of the body. It's the living thing. And the CEO of Avadim Health understands this. His name is Steve Woody, and let me tell you, his products are just taking the medical and therapeutic fields by storm. This is so cool because in this podcast, we're going to get to the bottom line with Steve. We're going to find out how he started his company, how he almost went bankrupt, and also what the future holds, which is just incredible. But my favorite part of this whole story is when Steve had a product and it was actually in his trash can and he pulled it out. Well, yeah, I'm just going to tell you that it's one of the most successful products now of all time. Well, hi there, Steve Woody. Oh my gosh, we're on the Starting Line podcast. This is so great.
No, I'm a bigger fan. I can tell you right now, I've been listening to you for years.
Hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. That's really kind of you to say. And you're in beautiful Asheville, aren't you?
That's correct.
So, Steve, thanks for joining us. I really just want this to be a casual conversation about how successful you are and how you started your own company. The whole idea is that we pass along your words of wisdom. We're going to talk about how you got there, your plans for the future. Sound good?
It sounds great.
So, Steve, I've done a little bit of research on you, and I've watched your TED Talk, which, by the way, was a really phenomenal TED Talk. And for any of our listeners, if you haven't seen a TED Talk with Steve Woody, you really should. So, Steve, let's get started when you were younger. You were kind of a math nerd, weren't you?
Actually, I would love to tell you I was. Truth be known, in college, I really was playing soccer. And apparently there's a rule in this country, if you actually play in college, you have to get a degree. And so I really couldn't do anything else other than math, and that's how I ended up majoring in math. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And it really went in some interesting ways. So I'd love to tell you that that was really what was my vision. It really wasn't. And I think my story is a lot about my vision wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I think it just kind of goes show. Sometimes your purpose finds you.
So what did you think that your vision would be? Who would you be when you grew up? I mean, did you see yourself running this multi-million-dollar company?
I really didn't. I really didn't even know that I liked entrepreneurship. I started with a small medical company coming out of school. I had a degree in math, and someone said that I could use it in the quality assurance regulatory affairs area. And I started there, and I really enjoyed the startup phase, and I was there for about 13 years and got pretty good at launching new products. And I loved, problem solving, as I said in my TED Talk. I used to think it was formulas and stuff, but problem solving is problem solving. And I really liked the more complex problem solving of launching a product or launching a company. And that really excited me. And I realized, being in a legacy company really wasn't for me. And I've been launching medical companies or products for, now 32 years.
All right. I want you to really think back now, Steve. Can you remember how much you made an hour at that very first job?
I'll never forget it because it was $4.50 an hour. And the only reason why I got a job then was there was 3 other people that were offered the job. And I was coming out of school. I had no experience. And the other people weren't willing to work for $4.50 an hour. And I said, well, that's great. I didn't know the medical industry from one or another. And I was just willing to go there and work for a couple years And as it turns out, I absolutely loved healthcare. I loved launching companies, and I've been in this sector ever since.
So you worked for this quality assurance company, as you said, for 13 years. So you started pretty much at the bottom level. And when you left, what was your position there?
I was doing product development. I was doing quality assurance and corporate regulatory affairs. We were a startup wound care company, and it was at the beginning. Most people don't realize this, but in 1985, early 80s, we were just starting to use disposable medical products in this country. Up until then, we would use gauze on one patient, and it would be washed out and sterilized and be used on the next patient.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding. I mean,
yeah, true story.
Are you done with that gauze? I mean, come on. We need to clean it up. We need it for the next person?
Yeah.
Is that really how it happened?
That was what was going on in the early 80s. I know that just brings horror on everybody, but we were the first disposable company in that space, and it was really exciting.
Well, I've always said that if you can invent a disposable product that was a necessity, I mean, think about trash bags. Think about what a great invention that was. It's probably the only product that we actually pay for, and then we pay to throw it away.
That's exactly right.
You know, that just blows my mind. I guess, well, I had no idea about disposable medical things like gauze being used time and time again. I'm sure latex gloves, were they also used time and time again?
Yeah, we were just starting to do single-use products. In fact, the FDA had just started to regulate it in 1976. And so the FDA was just starting to come in and audit companies, and they really didn't know what to audit for in the early 80s. And so we were both kind of learning from each other.
So was the manufacturing done there in Nashville, or was it done overseas?
It started in Asheville. It's a very interesting story. It was at the point in time when NAFTA and globalization hit. And we had here in Asheville probably 14 or 15 medical device companies. We were a very good manufacturing base here for textiles and for furniture. And when NAFTA hit and when globalization hit, if one of your competitors went offshore, you had to go. So I found myself a few years later setting up factories in China. And I was a part of that. In fact, when I first started going to China, there was a lot of people I hadn't seen a Caucasian person. There was a lot of people in Mao outfits when I first went there.
Wow, that's just crazy. My son Ian is now in his 6th year of studying Mandarin in school. It's a very different, difficult language with a lot of tones. Do you speak Mandarin? I mean, did you really need to speak Mandarin then? Because we didn't have, say, Google Translate.
No. I spoke enough to get through a meal and to say, shay. So I was very limited.
Okay, so during that time and knowing that they really hadn't been exposed to, say, too many Americans, what was it like in China?
It was so unique. I love the Chinese people because they were so receptive to what we were saying, both from setting up a quality organization. For example, if I said, well, we really need to build out a space for this or a space for that, I could come back a week later and that space would be built out exactly to the specifications that we needed. So they were great people to work with. I really enjoyed the Chinese people.
And so what year was this about?
This would have been 88, 89, going up into 92, 93. When I first started going to China, for example, in Shanghai, there was only 2 foreign hotels that you could stay at. Within 2 years, there was 150 high-rise hotels, for example. Because you got to remember, China didn't open up until, I guess it was 80, 81 maybe.
Wow, that's really something. That must have been quite the experience. Do you have any examples or any instances where you asked for something and maybe you said it incorrectly and they delivered what they thought you said that turned out to be kind of crazy?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I did. In the United States, if we're setting up a medical company, we would have an extermination program for insect and rodent control. You want to keep your facility clean. And I was asking them about their extermination program, like an orchid or something of that nature. And their faces went completely white. And I was like, what did I say? And there was only one word for extermination, and it wasn't about bugs. And so they were in a panic about what I was saying. And I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about rodents in the facility. And, that was probably the worst thing that I ever said.
Oh, geez. So they thought you were like exterminating people?
Yes.
Gosh, no wonder why they looked at you like, who is this guy anyway?
Which, by the way, culturally, that's not too far off from things that happened in those times. So it was not the right thing to say for sure.
All right. So what was the big product then?
The product that we were working on then was what was called a Laparotomy Sponge. It's a gauze product that they use. 80% of the surgeries, maybe even more, would have this with any surgery you would have here in the United States. And they use it to absorb blood during surgery and to wall off the cavity if they're working on abdominal surgery, something like that.
Was the manufacturing that much cheaper in China at that time?
Yes, it was. We actually worked really hard to do some textile projects here. And what was going on is the Chinese could just lower their prices to where they would lower them for 2 years and they would put you out of business, and you really couldn't do that. And it was very, very difficult to compete against the Chinese. It would be on a magnitude of well beyond half off of what we could do here in the United States. Now, that's balanced out quite a bit, I would believe now. I still think there are things that are cheaper there, but I think from a manufacturing perspective, you have to remember where we were in the 80s. We weren't the best manufacturing at that time. We were still trying to control quality, for example, and now we're much better at systems and processes. I don't think there's any better place to produce a product than in the United States, both for quality and efficiency. And I think that we are now way much more competitive. And of course, it's more expensive now in China. Their expenses have gone up as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm trying to think back to the mid-'80s. I mean, I remember I was carrying this compact, luggable laptop. I mean, I don't know if you remember those. I was also carrying a brick phone, and I thought, oh, gosh, I'm so cool with all my tech. Were you trying to arrange for manufacturing? I mean, we didn't have the internet then. Was it all primarily done through faxing?
Well, no, we actually had to get someone who would be an agent for us, and they would go in before us, do a lot of the pre-work at the time, and then someone like myself would come in and would really add the guts in detail to the business.
So, of course, you have the sponge. What was the next product after the sponge?
We started doing a whole host of products that were surgical accessories. In the industry, we call them kind of Me Too projects, where anything that you would need disposable surgery, that was really the area of expansion at the time.
And then you got into bacterial washes.
What happened is that I left there and started doing startups where if you had a concept for a medical device, you would come to us, and I had a team of folks, and we would do everything from the FDA filing to helping you set up your manufacturing in your facility. Eventually, we set up our own facility and started doing contract manufacturing, packaging, and sterilization for companies. Then what happened was I saw this technology that was the basis for Avadim. And truth be known, I did not want to do this project. I kind of thought it was stupid. And I saw it 3 times over a 5-year period. And the last time I saw it, there was a guy who had told me about it. I said, yes, I've seen this technology. And I said, I'm just not interested. And he said, well, would you test it and just tell me that it doesn't work? And then I can tell the guy who has the patent that we're not interested. And I said, sure. And so we tested it, and I had actually forgot that I sent it out for testing, to be completely honest. It was just off my to-do list.
Okay, so it was like, make the guy go away already, right?
Yeah. Well, the test results came back where they said, we've never seen anything like this. And I was like, are you sure? And they said, oh, yeah, we're sure. And truth be known, I had the prospectus. I had already thrown it in the trash can.
Oh, no. Did you really?
Yeah. This project started. I pulled it out of the trash can, and I'm a good old Southern boy, and it had sweet tea marks all over it. So I was trying to read through my sweet tea stains and trying to figure out what the deal was. And that was in November of 2006, and we bought the rights to the equipment and to the patent. And we started the company in March of 2007.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So the guy literally started in the trash can and you pulled him out.
Yeah, yes. I love to tell people I'm not a great visionary because I tried not to do this. And then it was a series of opportunities that came along where we started getting these clinical results that were way better than we expected and should have been, quite honestly. And I couldn't understand that. And I brought in a fellow by the name of Dr. Peter Elias, and he has been published over 600 times. And he's the one that discovered 40 years ago about how the outside layer of your skin works. I reference him in the TED Talk, if you remember.
Yeah, you said it was something cornea. What was the word?
Stratum cornea.
Yes.
And that's that outside layer of your skin of which you couldn't walk on Earth without it. And I started explaining to him the clinical outcomes we were getting. And he said, no, Steve, that makes complete sense. And he started putting dots together for us. And that's led to a whole host of new patents and science, really. We continue to go down this thread, and we find out, well, if that's true, then this could be true. And if that's true, then this could be true. And so it's a mathematical problem that we keep peeling back. And now, we envision over 30 therapies around optimizing how the outside layer of your skin works with your topical microbiome, those collection of organisms that are on your body that we didn't think mattered or we really wanted to get rid of them. Now we're finding out they're integral to your health. And so we're really that first company that's really taking those two things, your topical microbiome and your stratum corneum, and optimizing them, synchronizing them, if you will, and making them work depending on what gap that we're trying to address in healthcare. But it's certainly not what we set out to do, but it's where our discoveries have led us.
So now these, for lack of a better word, these solutions, are they primarily to prevent bacterial infections? Is that what it's used for?
It certainly can be used there. We currently have a couple branded products out there. TheraWorks Protect, which is used in ICUs, long-term care settings, chronic care settings. And then we have brands like TheraWorks Relief, which is sold through pharmacies. We're in 35,000 pharmacies now. And that product is used to help you with night cramps as we get older. And where the other product is all about working with your skin to not boost, but support your topical immune competency so that you yourself are the one that's fending off. So I think the best way to think about our therapy and our formulas is that, because everybody always asks me, what's the magic ingredient? And the magic ingredient in any of our products is you and what we do with that outside layer of your skin, because that outside layer of your skin has 10, even up to 15 defensive mechanisms that are absolutely critical to your life. Certainly when you're young, all the way through, particularly when we get to be over 50, and you're in a more chronic situation, your immune system is the most powerful thing you have. And a lot of the things that we do, whether it be cosmetics or alcohol gels, you think about all these antimicrobial products that we use, they're actually destroying those defensive functions. And if we just didn't destroy those defensive functions, and I was actually supporting the defensive functions, then we can have these clinical breakthroughs that we're causing.
So you're talking about the antibacterial soaps and the hand sanitizers that we're now using?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're doing is when you use an antimicrobial soap or an alcohol gel, for example, you're killing off both your good flora and the bad flora. And you increase the pH of your skin. You create an imbalance. And your good organisms like to grow at an acidic level of 5. People don't realize that their skin is pretty typically acidic when you're a healthy adult. All of the bad organisms that we're concerned about there, that when you go to the gym and you have MRSA infections, you have MRSA is on the equipment and those types of things. All of those organisms like to flourish at a more neutral pH. So when we do things that make the pH go up, and 5 to 7 doesn't sound like a big difference. But remember, mathematically, Your skin is 100 times more acidic than the superbugs should be able to flourish in. So all we have to do is keep your skin acidic, and we can really support your own immune system. But what did we do this morning? We all got in the shower with alkaline soaps that are 12 or 13. So it's going to take you and I 6 to 8 hours for our skin to get back acidic, where our defensive functions are working on our behalf. And then what we do is we exacerbate that by using the alcohol on our hands, tearing up all the good flora that's very defensive on your behalf. Even some of the facial cleansers that we're using, all of those things are actually working in the wrong direction. And that's what we're trying to draw attention to.
You know, that's really fascinating. You had all this R&D going on, and I take it that sales were exploding. And this would probably bring us, say through the 2000s. So how is business then?
Business is fantastic. But I can tell you those early years, it was really difficult. This is a pretty big paradigm shift. But over the last 4 years, we've been doubling in sales every year. And we'll be approaching this year. We actually quadrupled the company from about 10 million to almost 40 million. It'll be about 35, 38. So we're really excited about that.
Oh my gosh, I love entrepreneurship. I love success stories. Were there any downtimes, though, where you weren't sure you were going to make it?
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you this story. I came within 2 weeks of shutting this company down. I had my one company, G3 Medical, and that was the company that helped launch or support medical companies. And I was taking money from that and putting it into this new venture called Avadim. And everybody tells you don't take money from one that's making money and put it in another. That's business 101, but that's what I did. And I did it. I lost money in Avadim for the first 5, 6 years. And I got to the point where I had both companies where they were not on the verge of bankruptcy, but you couldn't cash flow them anymore. So I had stolen so much money out of the one company or taken it out that it was struggling to stay afloat. And I had gotten to the point where I knew I was going to close Avadim down. I just couldn't do it anymore. On January 21st of 2013. And through a friend, there was a man who came in who had taken 5 or 6 companies public, and he wanted to help me. His name was David Fan. He's our president now. And I said, David, I've lost money for 5 or 6 years. Who would want to invest in a company that's lost money for 5 or 6 years? He said, well, Steve, there's a lot of ways to value a company. And as an entrepreneur, we don't realize this. There's a lot of ways to value a company other than what they've made. There's patents that you have. There's clinical evidence that you have. There's a lot of work that's been done that has a lot of value. So we started raising money at the end of 12 in December of 2012. Well, if you know anything about raising money, there's nobody to talk to at the end of the year. That's not when people look to reallocate their portfolios. Turns out we made some presentations, and we actually raised money on January 9th. And we raised our first check was $100,000. So the difference between success and failure for me was January 9th to January 21st, of which this was going to get shut down. There was no possible way to continue it. And I think that's entrepreneurship. Anybody who sits before you and says they were successful and they could do it again, I just don't think they're being truthful. There's a lot of things that have to happen on your behalf besides a good idea or that you're pretty smart or that you know your industry. Capital is absolutely required. And you as an entrepreneur usually aren't good at understanding capital markets, how to get it, how to use it efficiently. And I always tell people, when you look at success, with my case, there was a lot of people that came around me that helped me to be successful. So it's really not my story. I think it's a lot of people's story.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when I started my company, I really didn't know what I was doing. I actually look back and call it the most expensive business degree anybody could ever get. With me running and starting this network, and even today, I still make mistakes. I don't know everything, but hopefully I'm pointing the boat in the right direction. So now you have this product that's going gangbusters, right? Let's talk a little bit about TheraWorks Relief.
Yeah, so TheraWorks Relief is our product. We have it in 35,000 pharmacies. A year ago, it was only in 4,000. It's been an unbelievable successful launch. And the product is used topically to attenuate cramps and spasms before you go to bed or when one occurs. It really works on both cases. And the reason why we chose that is because it's the largest market. It has 15 million sufferers that suffer 3 times or more a month or a week. And so we saw this really big marketplace where there really wasn't a good solution. The only solution was 2% of these folks were being treated with antispasmodic drugs. And so 98% really didn't have a solution. And that's kind of key to who Avadim Health is. We always look for, is there a significant healthcare gap where the drugs that are provided, or maybe the OTC products are provided, really aren't meeting the need. And this one was a perfect fit for that. And what it's proven is that if you have a good technology with good clinical evidence, you can be successful. And that's kind of been our story here.
Well, I have to tell you a story. I have a mentor in my life. His name is Fred. And Fred gave me my first job in radio when I was, I was maybe 25 years old. And he now sits on the board of my company. Fred used to own a couple of radio stations that he purchased for $6 million, and then he sold them for $90 million, just a little bit of a profit. He was also a beer distributor in Detroit, so you can imagine what kind of money he was making there.
Yep.
So we were just talking the other day about various clients, what's going on with the show, and now I have a show that's airing internationally on Bloomberg, and I mentioned TheraWorks. Well, I had to tell you that Fred, if he likes you, he likes you. And if he doesn't like you, he won't have anything to do with you. And he's also very opinionated. Obviously, he's very successful. He's a lawyer. He's polished. He's a gentleman. Like when I go out to dinner with Fred, he opens my door. He holds my chair. He orders dinner for me. It's actually quite nice. Anyway, so when I mentioned TheraWorks, Fred says to me, "Did you just say TheraWorks Relief?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I have 2 of those bottles sitting on my nightstand every single night." He explained that he uses TheraWorks Relief after he plays golf, which he does 3 times a week because he lives in a penthouse in Miami Beach. But anyway, he wanted me to tell you, Steve, that he absolutely loves your product. And if you ever need a testimonial, you can call him up.
Oh, that is fantastic. We get those testimonials really every day. It's so funny. People will take time to write us letters. And we get letters every week about how it changed their life. And so, which is really satisfying because that's who Avadim is. You know, Avadim, by the way, it means to serve. And that's the DNA. We had this name before we ever had this product, by the way. And we wanted to create a medical company that was about serving one another, where I come last, you come first. And we didn't want to just do a product that wasn't going to significantly affect global health. And so the one thing I didn't want to do, which was the thing obviously I needed to do, and it ended up coming together. But, that's our DNA, is really serving others. And we really hope by changing, like his life being changed, it makes a big difference. And that's what we want.
And let me tell you something. I have never seen a product on Amazon.com which has gotten so many 5-star reviews. I mean, it's crazy. Last time I checked, there were over 3,000 5-star reviews for TheraWorks Relief. That's got to be unheard of.
It's amazing. You know what? It just happens to be one of those products. And I think this is what's really exciting about just the science for a moment, is we had this ability. Think about it. Dr. Elias had been published 600 times for 40 years. And nobody, while they all accept all of his science, no one was designing any therapies or products around the science of how your body really works. It's like nobody stopped and thought about it. And what turned out is that we were doing what Dr. Elias had been preaching. And then when you do that, you have these just amazing results. And how often do you really get involved with something that just really works? It's really not that often.
So now TheraWorks. Tell me a little bit about the science. So you put it on. How does it work? You know, I don't want you to divulge any trade secrets here, but how does TheraWorks do its magic?
Yeah, so the best way to think about it and I'll do this from an athlete's perspective, but it's the same perspective for someone who's 65 years old and maybe on statins or something. But it all comes back to your circulation. And so for an athlete who's running, their muscles become inflamed, and as your muscles become inflamed, they put pressure on your capillary beds, and blood stops flowing really well. And to the point where it's your body's natural way of saying, hey, you might need to stop running, and you cramp up. Well, that's for an athlete. And let's think about someone who's 65. You go to sleep. You don't have the same circulatory health that you used to have. And blood stops flowing. So what happens is you're starving your muscles for oxygen in both scenarios. And so if we were able to lower or keep the pH of your stratum corneum lower, what we can do is we shut off some of the things that cause inflammation, and we can improve or support good, healthy blood flow. And if we can support good, healthy blood flow, we can keep you from getting these cramps. And we've seen it both in athletes. We've seen it both in, patients who are 65 and older. Sometimes we start getting them as early as 45, where you get someone like a teacher who's been standing on her feet all day and her foot will cramp at night. You still have a lot of that.
And once you put it on, how long does the relief last?
Well, you can put it on. Most people will say that it will keep them from having cramps most of the week. They'll still have one or two, and they can put it on, and usually in most cases it will relieve the cramps. I think if you looked at the reviews, it's always under a couple of minutes. It will relieve it. But in most cases, we can eliminate 80 or 90% of them. And so if you'll do it at night and in the morning, it works out really, really well for those people who are chronic. You can put it on more if you want, but usually morning and the evening before you go to bed is the best bet.
Now, I understand your company is kind of a family-owned company. You have a lot of family members who work for you. Is that true?
I did. It used to be in those days when I was talking about, we used to work in the front office, and then we'd have to go in the back and actually make product in the afternoons or evenings. And I think that's where, all entrepreneurs probably start there. And I have an amazing family, an amazing wife. I have 6 kids, 4 daughters, and 2 boys. And they've all been working here since they could legally work here. And but now my oldest is 30 and my youngest is 16. So now most of those are getting married and having kids. I still make my youngest, he works in the maintenance department. So I make him paint poles in the manufacturing facility all year round, and it's good experience for him.
It actually helps to build a good work ethic, too. Now, is your mom still in the purchase order department there?
Yes. My mom is amazing. She's 91 years old, and she's been fighting breast cancer for 10 years. And she used to run all of my finances back when I started in 1997 when I started G3 Medical. And she still works with us. She comes in 3 times a week. You can't stop her from working. And she would outwork you or I any day of the week at 91.
She sounds a lot like my mother. My mother's now battling pancreatic cancer. And boy, I'll tell you, they can fight the fight, can't they? Oh, wow. Yes. I mean, I am just so proud of my mom. She is an amazing lady. And I tell you what, she's as smart as you would ever want to be. She's one of my mentors that I still ask her questions. What do you think about this? What would you do in this situation? She is a great problem solver. Okay, Steve, so you're running this company. You've got mom in the office. Does she ever say, hey, Sonny, this is exactly what you're doing wrong. You got to straighten up and fly right? Oh, she tells me what I'm doing wrong every day. But as she says, I don't listen to her a whole lot. That's awesome. You know what? This has been a great talk, Steve. Is there anything that I missed that you think that our listeners of this podcast would like to know? The only thing I would like to add a little bit that we really didn't talk about was, as a company, Avadim Health is all about discovering new ways to care. And I think we've talked a lot about what we do in terms of different science, and it's a paradigm shift of whether we're talking about infection prevention or
all the way to how we're attenuating cramps, which is all exciting, and that's great. But part of our discovering new ways to care is what we want to do with giving back. The purpose of the company or the vision is to take healing to the nations. And that's our goal. And we can only do that through being hugely successful as a business. And what we do is we want to give back our product into nursing outposts worldwide, whether it be in Ethiopia or India or Accra, Ghana. And we've recently been supplying product to leper colonies in India. We've been supporting the red light district in India, where these girls have just awful infections. And that's the goal of the company. I tell you a funny story. I came home the other night and I told my wife, I said, honey, I know this sounds weird, but I think we're going to sponsor a brothel in India. And these are just tragic stories. If you can imagine, there are 500,000 of these ladies, and they've been sold into sex slavery, and it's very difficult to get them out. And they have huge infection issues. And so what we do is we give product to each one of those. In this one building, there are 99 brothels, and that we support, and we give them product. And, I bring that up. It's a sad story. We're blessed to be in the country we are and the situations we have. But I would think about my 4 daughters, and why are we here? Why are they there? I don't understand. That's beyond me. But as a company, that's really what we want to do, is we want to be hugely successful. But we want to give a lot of product away and change a lot of lives, whether it be in India or wherever. And it's just core to who we are and what we love doing.
That's so important. It's the ultimate goal, I think, of every company. How can I better mankind? Well, it sure sounds like you guys are doing a fantastic job at it.
We're trying. We're taking baby steps, but we're getting there. And so, and this has been fun. I really appreciate it. I have so much respect for you and what you've done. And it's been great. I've been listening to you for years. And it's good to hear that you struggle too.
Oh, geez, do I struggle? I mean, there were those days where either the bottom line was red or it was black. And you and I actually come from a similar background. I have a computer programming degree, but I've never really programmed except for, say, a couple of months at IBM. And obviously, that was many, many years ago. But what it taught me to do is to really think logically, such as, if A happens and B happens, then we have to look at the result for C. And what's the relationship between A and B? What's the relationship between A and C? And how do I get to F? That type of thing.
Yep.
It's probably the same way with you, because math has trained your brain all those years ago to maybe think like a formula. If this happens, then that happens, or else this might happen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that is the key to good strategic thought, is that if-then statement. And if I hadn't had that background, wouldn't be here. I agree with you 100%.
And I think it serves an entrepreneur well to have that type of logic, and then to have some marketing. But as you astutely say, that you need to have good people, solid people, loyal people around you at all times. Well, you have to come to Phoenix someday, Steve, and say hello to us. And come tour the studios if you ever get out here.
I will come, and I promise I will be there, and I will visit with you. This has been great.
Well, I'm looking forward to you coming out. Hey, by the way, Scottsdale, Phoenix, spring break, we can go to a baseball game.
All right, you're on.
Gosh, I'll tell you, Steve told us some fantastic stories about starting a company, having persistence and resilience. And then there are the down times, there are the up times. And I really hope that you enjoyed this Starting Line podcast. And if you did, be sure to give us a great 5-star rating and write us a tremendous review over at Apple and Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, because that helps more people find our podcasts. And if you have a suggestion for somebody that you think we should interview on our Starting Line podcast, be sure to reach out to us at the website, commando.com. And at the bottom of the page, it says Contact Us. And guess what? That's where you can drop me a note. I read every single email that you folks send me. And thanks for listening.